It was still dark when Maya stepped out of her small house. The early morning air was cold, and the sky was only just beginning to change from deep black to dark blue. Maya wrapped her thin coat tightly around her, took a deep breath, and started her long walk. Every day she walked 20 miles to work, and today was no different. She walked quickly through the quiet streets. The houses were still dark, and there wasn't a single car in sight. The only sound was the soft tap of her shoes on the pavement. Maya knew every street by heart now. She had been walking this path for months, but no one seemed to notice her. She liked it that way. The loneliness of the early morning gave her time to think. Her steps were steady but slow. As she passed through one neighborhood and then another, her mind wandered. She remembered the days when she didn't have to walk so far. Back then, she had a car, a little more money, and life wasn't so hard. But things had changed. Now she didn't have much, just enough to survive and take care of her family. Why doesn't she take a bus? Someone might wonder if they saw her walking this early. The truth was simple. She couldn't afford it. Every penny she earned went to more important things. Maya had learned to make sacrifices, and this long walk was just one of many. As she passed by closed shops and empty roads, her tired feet ached. Her shoes, once new, were now worn out from miles of walking. The soles were thin, and she could feel every crack and bump on the road. But Maya didn't stop. She never stopped. She had work to get to, and she couldn't afford to be late. The sun was starting to rise, casting a soft glow over the city, but Maya still had many miles to go. Her legs were sore, and her back hurt from the long journey, but she didn't complain. This was her life now, and she accepted it. People who saw her might wonder why she worked so hard. Maya wasn't one to share her story with others. She kept her struggles to herself, but there was a deep determination in her heart. She had to keep going. She had to make it to work. She had a family depending on her, and giving up wasn't an option. As Maya walked through yet another quiet neighborhood, she looked at the houses. Some of them were large and beautiful, with big cars parked outside. She didn't feel jealous, but it was hard not to imagine what life would be like if things were different for her. If only she didn't have to walk these 20 miles every day. If only life had taken a kinder turn. Still, she pushed those thoughts aside and kept moving. The people in those big houses would never know what it was like to walk so far just to make ends meet. They didn't know about her long hours at work or the sacrifices she made to keep her family going. Maya didn't expect them to understand, and she didn't need them to. She walked for herself and for those she loved. The sun was now fully in the sky, casting light on the streets ahead. It was a new day, and Maya was almost halfway to her destination. Her body was tired, but her spirit was strong. As she turned onto another long, empty road, she felt a sense of pride. Every step she took was a step toward her goal. It wasn't easy, but she was making it work. For now, her journey continued in silence. No one knew her story, and no one stopped to ask why she walked so far. But Maya didn't mind. She had learned to carry her burdens quietly. She would walk those 20 miles again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until one day, maybe things would change. For now, all she could do was keep moving forward. Officer James had been on the force for several years. He knew the streets of his town well, and had seen just about everything during his time in the police department. But one thing caught his attention every morning. A woman, always walking the same road, always at the same time. It started as something he barely noticed, just another person walking in the early hours. But as days passed, James began to see her more frequently. She was always alone, always heading in the same direction, and always walking, no matter the weather. Rain, cold, or heat, nothing seemed to stop her. One morning, James was sitting in his patrol car, sipping coffee when he saw her again. She was walking at her usual slow pace, head down, hands tucked into the pockets of her thin coat. Her shoes looked worn, almost as if they'd walked hundreds of miles. It struck him as odd. Why would someone walk such a long way every single day? Curiosity began to nag at James. He'd seen a lot of people in difficult situations, but this woman, there was something different about her. She wasn't asking for help, didn't look like she was in any immediate danger, but still, there was a quiet determination in her stride that made him wonder. Why doesn't she take a bus? He thought. Why doesn't she drive? The more he thought about it, the more questions filled his mind. Maybe she was struggling financially. Maybe she didn't have anyone to help her. Or maybe there was something else, something deeper he didn't know about. For a while, James tried to ignore his growing interest. It wasn't his place to interfere with someone's life, just because they walked a long way to work. But the more he saw her, the more he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One particularly cold morning, James made up his mind. He would follow her, just to see where she was going. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable or scare her. He would keep a distance, observe, and try to figure out her story. As she passed by his patrol car, James quietly pulled out of the parking lot and followed her at a slow pace. She didn't notice him. Her focus was on the road ahead, her head slightly bowed as she kept walking, mile after mile. The road ahead stretched for miles, and James couldn't help but feel amazed at her endurance. He had driven this road many times, but he had never realized how far it really was until he saw her walking it. His respect for her grew, but so did his concern. After several miles, Maya turned into a quiet street that led to an old diner. James parked his car a block away and watched as she stepped inside. She wasn't carrying any food or anything to suggest she was just grabbing breakfast. No, she was there to work. The realization hit him hard. She was walking all this way for a job. But why? Why go through all that trouble every single day? James sat in his car for a long time, staring at the entrance of the diner, thinking about the woman he had just followed. What kind of life does she have? He wondered. His mind raced with possibilities, each one adding to the mystery of Maya's life. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. There was more to her story than he could see. That day, as Officer James drove away, he decided he wasn't done. He needed to learn more. There was something in her quiet determination that spoke to him. She wasn't just a woman walking to work. She was carrying something much heavier, and he felt compelled to find out what it was. The next morning, Officer James couldn't shake the thoughts from the day before. He had followed Maya to the diner, but his curiosity had only deepened. There were still too many unanswered questions. What kind of life did she lead? What was driving her to walk so far every day? When he saw her again, walking that same lonely road, James made up his mind to follow her once more. But this time, he was more focused, more determined. He needed to see her routine more clearly. He needed to understand why she endured so much. As Maya passed by his parked patrol car, James waited until she was out of sight before starting his engine. He followed her from a distance, careful not to be noticed. He didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't stop himself from observing. James watched as Maya walked through the empty streets. Her pace was slow but steady. She didn't seem to look around or notice anything but the road ahead of her. There was a heavy weight in her steps, as if she was carrying something no one else could see. The officer felt a strange sense of admiration for her, but also sadness. How many people passed her by each day without even knowing what she was going through? How many people didn't care to ask why she walked so far, so quietly? As Maya walked through yet another neighborhood, James noticed something. She seemed more tired today. She paused for a brief moment, wiping sweat from her brow, then continued. Her shoes were even more worn than he had thought the day before. Every crack in the pavement must have hurt her feet, but she kept going. The longer James followed her, the more his heart sank. He could see the weariness in her, but also a strength that kept her going. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. Should he talk to her? Offer her a ride? But would that solve the real problem? After nearly an hour of following her in silence, Maya finally reached the diner again. James parked a little farther this time and watched as she walked inside. He stayed in his car, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He had followed her 2 days in a row, but he still felt like he was just scratching the surface of her story. A few minutes later, he saw Maya through the diner window. She had changed into a faded uniform, and her tired face was now hidden behind a smile as she served customers. It was like she had put on a mask, hiding the struggles of her morning behind a cheerful, hardworking facade. James watched her move around the diner, serving food and cleaning tables. She was polite and friendly to everyone, but no one knew the journey she had just made to get there. No one knew the sacrifices she was making every day. The officer sat there for a while, thinking, "What kind of life is this?" he wondered. How long has she been doing this? He realized that Maya's life was full of struggles he couldn't fully understand, and yet there was still more he needed to know. James decided to come back again the next day. He didn't have the full picture yet, but he was determined to find out more. There was a hidden story behind this woman's quiet walk, and he was going to uncover it. The following day, Officer James returned once more. By now, he had a routine of his own, waiting in his car for Maya to pass by, and then quietly following her as she made the long journey to work. But today, something felt different. He felt more restless, more concerned. As Maya walked, her steps seemed slower than usual. There was a weariness in her that hadn't been there before. She looked thinner, more fragile, as if the weight of her struggles was finally catching up to her. James could see it clearly now. This wasn't just about walking long distances. There was something deeper going on. James followed her closely, watching her every move. Each step seemed to take more effort. Each block she passed felt heavier. As they neared a busy intersection, something unexpected happened. Maya stumbled. Her foot caught on a crack in the pavement, and she fell to her knees, her hands hitting the ground with a painful thud. For a moment, she just stayed there, breathing heavily, as if the weight of the world had finally brought her down. James stopped his car and rushed out. He ran over to her, kneeling beside her as she tried to stand. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. Maya looked up at him, startled by his sudden appearance. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she tried to get up. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice weak but determined. She quickly wiped the dirt from her palms, as if trying to brush off her struggle as something minor. But James could see that this was no small thing. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her body was pushed to its limits. "You're not fine," he said gently. "Let me give you a ride." For a moment, Maya hesitated. Her pride fought against her need for help, but her body was too weak to argue. Reluctantly, she nodded, and James helped her to her feet. As they walked to his patrol car, James kept quiet, giving her space. He didn't want to push her, but he was burning with questions. Once they were seated in the car, he finally asked, "Why do you walk so far every day?" Maya didn't answer right away. She stared out the window, her tired eyes watching the world pass by. After a long silence, she spoke softly. "I don't have a choice," she said. "I need this job, and I can't afford to lose it. The bus fare is too expensive. I don't have a car anymore." James listened quietly, his heart sinking as she explained her situation. She had lost her car months ago when she fell behind on payments. Ever since, she had been walking to work every day, putting in long hours just to make ends meet. She had 2 kids to feed, bills piling up, and no one to rely on but herself. "It's just temporary," she added quickly, as if trying to convince herself. "Once I save up enough, I'll get a car again. Things will get better." But James wasn't so sure. From the way she spoke, it sounded like she had been saying the same thing for months, maybe even years. He could see the cracks in her optimism, the way her hope was starting to fade under the weight of reality. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he asked softly. Maya gave a sad smile. "Help," she repeated, almost as if the word was foreign to her. "I don't have anyone to ask. People don't notice someone like me. They don't see the struggles we go through. And even if they did, I can't expect others to fix my problems." James sat in silence, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that she had been carrying this burden alone for far too long, hidden from the world. The long walks, the hard work, the sacrifices. No one had noticed until now. As they approached the diner, James pulled over and turned to her. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," he said. "Let me help you. There are programs, services, something. You don't have to walk 20 miles every day just to survive." Maya looked at him, her tired eyes filled with both gratitude and doubt. "I'll be fine," she said softly. "I've been fine this long. I just have to keep going." But as she stepped out of the car, James knew that things couldn't go on like this forever. He couldn't ignore what he had seen. She needed help, even if she didn't realize it yet, and he was going to find a way to give it to her. As Maya stepped out of the patrol car and headed into the diner, Officer James felt a sense of urgency growing within him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something bigger. The woman he had been silently observing was more than just a figure walking down the street. She was a mother, a worker, and a survivor, and her story was unfolding right in front of him. Inside the diner, Maya put on her apron, a smile plastered across her face. She greeted the regular customers and started taking orders as if nothing had happened. But James could see the fatigue lingering in her eyes. He knew that behind the cheerful demeanor, there was a woman struggling to keep her head above water. While she worked, James sat at the counter, ordering a cup of coffee but mainly watching her. The diner was busy, filled with the sounds of clinking plates and chatter, but Maya moved through it all like a dance, skillfully navigating between tables. Yet every time he caught her eye, he could see a flicker of vulnerability that she tried to hide. As she served food, he thought about what she had said in the car. "I can't expect others to fix my problems." It struck him deeply. Here was a woman doing everything she could to survive, yet she felt completely alone. It wasn't just about walking miles to work. It was about the weight of her responsibilities, the burden of her situation, and the loneliness that came with it. After a while, James decided he needed to speak to her again. When there was a lull in the customers, he called her over. "Maya," he said, keeping his voice low so as not to attract attention. "I've been thinking about what you said." She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "About what?" "About asking for help," he replied, looking her in the eyes. "You don't have to face this alone. There are people who care, who can help you." Maya looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "I appreciate your concern, officer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I've managed this long. I can't just ask for charity. I don't want to be a burden." James felt a pang in his heart at her words. "You're not a burden," he insisted gently. "You're just a person trying to do your best. And there are resources out there, programs that can help you get back on your feet. You don't have to keep walking that long distance." She shook her head, her expression a mix of stubbornness and fear. "What if I accept help and things still don't change? What if it doesn't make a difference? I can't let myself hope for something that might not happen." "But what if it does?" he challenged gently. "You'll never know unless you try. Sometimes asking for help is the bravest thing you can do." For a moment, Maya looked lost in thought, her gaze drifting to the diner windows. She seemed to be weighing his words, the idea of asking for help swirling in her mind like a storm. James could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, battling against years of struggle and hardship. "You deserve better," he added softly, trying to reach her heart. "You're working so hard. Don't let your pride keep you from a better life for you and your kids." Finally, she met his gaze, and for the first time, James saw a glimmer of vulnerability in her eyes. Maybe I could look into it," she said hesitantly, her voice trembling. "But I don't even know where to start." "I can help you with that," James offered immediately. "I can connect you with some local services. They can help with transportation, food assistance, anything you need. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself anymore." As they spoke, Maya's defenses began to lower. She could feel the warmth of James's genuine concern wrapping around her like a safety net. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone was willing to listen, willing to help. "Okay," she finally said, a hesitant smile breaking through her worry. "I'll think about it." James nodded, feeling a rush of relief. "That's all I ask. Just think about it. You're not alone in this." As the diner began to fill up again with customers, Maya returned to her duties, but something had changed. There was a flicker of hope in her heart, a spark that hadn't been there before. James watched her, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He knew that this was just the beginning of her journey, but at least now, she didn't have to walk it alone. The next morning, Maya awoke with a mix of emotions swirling in her mind. After her conversation with Officer James, she couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of change. It felt both exciting and terrifying. Would reaching out for help actually make a difference in her life? She prepared for her long walk, but today felt different. There was a hint of determination in her steps. As she walked, she thought about her children and how much she wanted a better life for them. James had offered her a lifeline, and she could feel her heart beating faster with the idea of taking that first step towards something better. When she arrived at the diner, she found James waiting for her outside. He smiled as she approached, a glimmer of encouragement in his eyes. "Good morning, Maya. Ready for a change?" he asked. "I think so," she replied hesitantly, her heart racing. "I've been thinking about what you said, about asking for help." "That's a great start," James replied, nodding enthusiastically. "Today, let's go to the community center. They have resources that can help you with transportation, food assistance, and even job training if you want it." As they drove to the community center, Maya felt a whirlwind of emotions: nervousness, excitement, and a little fear. What if she didn't qualify for help? What if they turned her away? But James's presence was reassuring. He chatted with her about everyday things: the weather, the news, even their favorite meals at the diner. Slowly, Maya felt herself relax. She realized that she wasn't just some invisible woman in need. She was Maya, a person with hopes and dreams. When they arrived at the community center, James parked and walked with her inside. The building was bright and welcoming, with friendly faces greeting them. As they approached the front desk, James introduced her to Sarah, a staff member who specialized in helping individuals like Maya. "Hi, Maya. It's so nice to meet you," Sarah said with a warm smile. "How can we help you today?" Taking a deep breath, Maya explained her situation: how she walked 20 miles to work every day, her struggles with transportation, and her desire for a better life for her children. As she spoke, she felt the weight of her burden slowly lifting, replaced by a sense of hope. Sarah listened intently, nodding along. "You're in the right place," she said encouragingly. "We can help with transportation vouchers, food assistance, and even connect you with job training programs." James stood beside Maya, feeling a swell of pride for her courage. He had seen how hard she worked and how much she struggled, and now she was taking action to change her life. It was a beautiful sight. After the initial meeting, Sarah handed Maya a brochure filled with information about the programs available to her. "Take this home, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We're here to help you every step of the way," Sarah assured her. As they left the community center, Maya felt a spark of hope igniting within her. "I can't believe I actually did it," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "You did great," James replied, smiling at her. "This is just the beginning. Now you have the support you need." Over the next few days, Maya began to explore the programs she had learned about. With the transportation vouchers, she no longer had to endure the grueling 20-mile walk to work. Instead, she was able to take the bus, which saved her time and energy. Every day, she felt lighter. She could spend more time with her children and less time worrying about the daily grind. And with James checking in on her regularly, she felt like she had a friend who truly cared. But with this newfound freedom came the realization that she had to work hard to change her situation. She enrolled in a job training program to learn new skills and improve her chances of getting a better job. Each class was a challenge, but she welcomed it. She was finally taking control of her life. One afternoon, while studying for her training course, Maya received a text from James. "How's everything going? Ready for your first bus ride tomorrow?" She smiled at the screen, feeling a warmth spread through her. She replied, "Yes, I can't believe how much easier everything is becoming. Thank you for your support." As she lay in bed that night, she reflected on how far she had come. She was still on a long journey, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. And for her children's sake, she was determined to keep going. Weeks passed, and Maya found herself adjusting to the changes in her life. With the help of the community center, she no longer had to walk 20 miles to work. Instead, she could now take the bus, which allowed her to arrive at her job feeling more energized and focused. The strain that had weighed heavily on her shoulders began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and purpose. As she settled into her new routine, Maya started attending her job training classes diligently. Each session was filled with new skills and knowledge that she was eager to absorb. She learned about computer skills, resume writing, and interview techniques. Her confidence grew with every lesson, and she felt like she was building a new foundation for her future. One day, as she sat in class, she noticed a flyer on the bulletin board advertising a job fair happening next week. The words "New Opportunities Await" caught her eye, and her heart raced with excitement. She knew that this could be a chance to take a big step toward a better job, one that would offer her a livable wage and stability. After class, Maya rushed to the community center and found Sarah. "I saw the flyer for the job fair," she said, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Do you think I should go?" "Absolutely. It's a perfect opportunity to network and meet potential employers," Sarah replied, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. "I can help you prepare for it. Let's work on your resume and practice your elevator pitch." Feeling a mix of nerves and excitement, Maya agreed. They spent the next few days refining her resume, rehearsing her pitch, and ensuring she felt confident and ready for the job fair. With each practice session, Maya felt more empowered. She was no longer just surviving. She was starting to thrive. The day of the job fair arrived, and Maya felt a whirlwind of emotions. She wore a new outfit she had purchased with the help of the community center and took a deep breath before stepping inside the venue. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as job seekers mingled with employers. With Sarah by her side for support, Maya navigated through the various booths, meeting recruiters and learning about different companies. Her heart raced as she handed out her resume, sharing her story and aspirations. Each conversation built her confidence, and she could feel the weight of her past struggles beginning to fade. "You've got this, Maya. Just be yourself," Sarah whispered as they approached the booth of a company that piqued her interest. After several meaningful conversations, Maya approached a woman representing a local tech company. "Hi, I'm Maya. I'm really interested in your company and the opportunities you offer," she said, her voice steady. The recruiter smiled warmly. "Hi, Maya. Tell me about yourself." For the first time, Maya felt proud to share her story. She talked about her journey, her determination to provide for her children, and her eagerness to learn new skills. As she spoke, she saw the recruiter's eyes light up with interest. "I love your passion," the recruiter said. "We're always looking for dedicated individuals who want to grow. Would you be interested in an interview?" Stunned, Maya nodded vigorously. "Yes, I'd love that." As she left the job fair, Maya felt a mix of emotions: excitement, anxiety, and a renewed sense of hope. She had taken a leap into the unknown, and it felt exhilarating. A few days later, she found herself sitting in the office of the tech company for her interview. James had come along to support her, and she was grateful for his presence. The interviewers asked her questions about her experience, her skills, and her goals. Each answer she gave felt more authentic and confident than the last, As the interview wrapped up, the lead interviewer smiled and said, "We'll be in touch soon, Maya. Thank you for coming in today. You've got a great story." Walking out of the building, Maya felt like she was floating. "I can't believe I did that," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. James grinned at her. "You were amazing. I told you that you had it in you. No matter what happens, you should be proud of yourself." Days turned into a week, and Maya found herself checking her phone constantly, anxiously awaiting news from the tech company. Then, one afternoon, she received a call that changed everything. "Hi, Maya. This is Sarah from the tech company. We loved your interview and would like to offer you a position." Overwhelmed with joy, Maya could hardly believe her ears. "Are you serious?" she gasped. "Absolutely. We believe you'll be a great addition to our team. Can you start next week?" With tears of happiness streaming down her face, Maya accepted the offer. She hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief and triumph wash over her. She had finally taken control of her life and created a brighter future for herself and her children. As she celebrated with James later that day, she couldn't help but reflect on her journey. She thought about the long walks, the struggles, and the moments of doubt. But she also thought about the friendships she had formed, the support she had received, and the courage she had found within herself. "I want to thank you," she said to James, her voice filled with sincerity. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You helped me find the strength to change my life." James smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You did this, Maya. You took the steps to create a better life. I'm just glad I could help." As they toasted to her new beginning, Maya felt a surge of hope for the future. She was ready to embrace the challenges ahead, knowing she was no longer alone. With determination and support, she would keep walking forward, ready to face whatever came next. The journey had been long and arduous, but now it was filled with promise. A new chapter awaited, and Maya was ready to write her own story, one step at a time.